Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bats and the Belfry here, back for another video. In 2026, we actually have 3 Friday the 13th. I missed my first chance in February, but time I'm recording this, there is one in March and there is one in November. At least after Halloween kind of keeps the spookiness going a little bit. And I thought it was a perfect opportunity to at least do a ranking of all the Friday the 13th movies from worst to first I've ever really done, of strictly just Friday the 13th themed episode on this channel. So yeah, why don't we do worst to first? I mean, it's kind of inevitable. I'm shocked I haven't done one prior. Let's get started with this. First up, we're starting at the bottom of the barrel. This pick, I don't really think it's much surprise that a lot of people, if this is at the bottom of their list, I feel like a good amount of people probably have this at the bottom of their list. I'm gonna go Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I don't know. I mean, I've seen it in most recent example is like Halloween Ends, where it's like if the last movie of your franchise is the lack of the character that people want to see in your movie. I don't know why people do that, and this is an example of like one of the first, I think. Yeah, Jason's barely in this movie. He's in the very beginning. He basically gets blown up to smithereens. Some guy at the morgue coroner just decides to eat his heart, and then Jason possesses him. That's your movie. It's not good. Honestly, think I've seen it like once, maybe twice at most. It's just one that's not that interesting. It's like put on a movie expecting to see just a slasher film of Jason. Want to see some kills, obviously. I give kudos for trying something different, but it's like that's what they did with Halloween Ends. It's like, why would you close out like a trilogy or like supposedly the last movie of your franchise, at least for a good while? Why would you just like leave Michael Myers completely out of your movie for most of it? Same with this. It's like you have Kane Hodder as Jason and he's in like 5 minutes total of the movie. It's just silly. How Jason comes back to his like normal body makes absolutely no sense. I know this probably does have its little bit of fans out there. More recently, it's probably gotten a little more love and people are really hard on this movie, but this is one I don't really ever see myself coming around on. It's like, I want to see Jason. Your movie doesn't have Jason in it. Next up, a little bit better than the bottom of the barrel, but still not very good. This one probably doesn't surprise a lot of people either, and that's Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason on a Boat. Actually, a lot of people would call that Jason on a Boat. This movie is the ultimate mismarketing. I'm sure in the 80s, people actually probably thought most of the movie was going to be Jason in New York City, and that's not the case. He's in Manhattan for like the last, I want to say 10, I'll be generous and say maybe 15 minutes of the movie. That's it. Most of the rest of this movie is just Jason just hops on a boat and kills some people. I guess the silver lining of this movie is it does have like a couple memorable deaths. I do like the flying V guitar death. Just being a heavy metal fan, I was just like, that's a pretty metal kill. I don't know. I appreciate that. And then there's the Jason punching the guy's head off and then falls into a dumpster. So it had that going for it. It's not a very memorable movie when you're expecting Jason to kind of just like go into New York City. Maybe I'm jumping to conclusions here, but I feel like if your movie actually delivered on Jason being in Manhattan, I think this probably would have been at least up there on a lot of people's favorite Friday the 13th if it delivered on that front, but it didn't. And usually there's a lot of Jason unmasking scenes and such, and this one doesn't really deliver. Jason looks like, I don't know, like a sludge monster or like a clay monster. It's not very flattering, especially when the previous movie, The New Blood, like his unmasking, he looked awesome, and this just, he didn't look very good at all. It's definitely not a good one in the franchise, and when you're at Part 8, it's like you kind of have to deliver on something, and this one didn't really do a whole lot for me. Next up is Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. It's kind of hard like putting this one in the list because it's like, it's not among one of the worst Friday the 13th films. I think its biggest criticism, of course, is Jason isn't the killer anymore because he supposedly died in Part 4, the final chapter. But Part 5, it's not a bad movie in any regard. The fallout from Tommy Jarvis in Part 4 as a kid. So you kind of are going through like most of the movie, like not sure of like who the killer is, so it still is kind of a whodunit. It's kind of like a refresh on the series. I would say the kills aren't super memorable. Like, I honestly don't remember a lot of kills from this one. Depending on the person's opinion who you ask, sometimes like the more forgettable one would be considered a worse one than just one that's bad, but at least you remember it. It's like, I didn't think this is a bad movie, but yeah, the lack of Jason being the killer and him not really being in the movie, you just have like a copycat killer. It's fine. I understand what they were trying to do. It's just funny that they called this, like, they call Part 4 the final chapter, and then Part 5 was like really rushed out like immediately. So it didn't even give people the sense that it's like, oh, at least like there's not going to be one of these for a little while. Like it was just immediately like right after number 4. It's like, oh yeah, 5's coming out. It's not a bad movie, but it's definitely on the bottom. Like this is one that I don't necessarily go back to all that much. Next up is one that, depending who you ask, might say this is probably the worst of the series. I am a big fan of just bad movies in general. Like I am a fan of B horror. A lot of just movies that I would consider so bad that I think they are good because it's just fun. And to me, if your horror movie's fun, you get a lot of kudos from me immediately. So that's Jason X. I like this movie. It's stupid. When you have a horror franchise go to space, that's kind of how you know you've run out of ideas. And that's kind of the case here, because it was like, well, what else are you going to do? You know, you had Jason Goes to Hell, where Jason was a snake for like 5 seconds. And then you're like, well, what else could we do? Well, let's go to space. I like Uber Jason. It's just funny. Like some of the kills are really fun. The acting's so bad. It's basically just like, you know, if you kind of want like an alien, like a bad Alien sequel mixed with a Friday the 13th movie, Jason X is the movie for you. It has my favorite Friday the 13th kill of the whole series, which it was like the cryo, like, I don't know, like thing that woman's like face gets like put into and her face freezes immediately and Jason smashes her face on the table. That's just a really gnarly cool death. Yeah, it's still a fun movie. I mean, obviously it's bad, but I like it a lot. So yeah, even despite how lower on the list it is, I still enjoy this movie for like when I'm in the mood for just something really silly and stupid. Jason X is a good one to watch. Above that is Friday the 13th Part 3. I don't necessarily think this is like one of the like better Friday the 13th movies. This one is a very important one of the series because this is the very first Friday the 13th movie where Jason dons his hockey mask. It is quite surprising to newcomers of the series for like, if you just tell them, you're like, just by the way, you know, it's not till Part 3 that Jason gets his hockey mask. Some people might be shocked by that. Yeah, and that's the case here. This was like during the craze of the 80s where they were trying to make 3D movies. So of course this is like very marketed as Friday the 13th Part 3D or whatever. As far as from a 3D standpoint, I've never watched it in 3D, so I can't really answer on that end. But there are a couple deaths where you're like, yeah, they did that because it was going to be 3D. I know there was one, there was like I forget what type of gun it is, but it like shoots like a really like long, like a spear gun or something like that. There's the spear gun death that's pretty memorable. How Jason dies, I think, is one of the more memorable ones of the series. I like that. I like that whole barn scene at the very end of that comes back into play later in the series, the remake. I really like the barn scene at the end. It's not a bad one. It's got a couple of memorable moments. And you know, this was towards the beginning of the series, so it wasn't nearly as like, okay, they've fleshed a lot of ideas out already, so it was like it was still pretty fresh in the series. Jason just got his hockey mask, so it was like that was a new look for him already. You know, Part 2 with the burlap sack, so he was still evolving. So next up is Friday the 13th, the remake from 2009. It's actually been quite a while since we've gotten a Friday the 13th movie. It's been a long time, actually. I mean, I know there's the whole like this whole lawsuit that's been tied up, and it's been kind of a mess with the makers, and I don't know the whole shebang, but I just hear stuff. It's just like, you know, Sean Cunningham, who like helped create the movie, and you know, the whole concept of Jason, and you know, the whole franchise. So it's a big mess. That's probably the reason we haven't gotten a new movie in quite a long time. There's some stuff that I really enjoy about the Friday the 13th remake. It's come around on a lot of people over the years. I still don't think it's like a great Friday the 13th movie. It has some really cool moments. Like, I actually think the opening, it's like quite a long opening. Like Jason borderline slaughters an entire group of teenagers like in the first 20 minutes. Actually, yeah, it's like 20 to 30 minutes in the movie that you don't see the title Friday the 13th. So that's pretty cool. I think the first like third of the movie is pretty great. You have Jared Padalecki, I forget his name, or as I like to call him, Dean from Gilmore Ghouls. That's a fun show. He's in this movie. He really, to me, I haven't really seen him much in other stuff. I've never seen Supernatural. I've watched Gilmore Girls, and he's okay in that, but I feel like he's like really phoning it in this movie. So like for him being the lead, it's not that good. My big gripe with this movie is like in the beginning, like the first third, it's like it's implied that like the final girl that Jason's going after in like the first third of the movie dies. She ends up being alive later in the movie. movie, find out that he just kept her captive. But I don't really understand why Jason would ever do that, because he's never really done anything like that. At least what I remember of all the Friday the 13th movies, and I've seen most of them in recent memory, I don't remember Jason ever doing that with anybody. So I was very confused of why he kept just this girl captive. It's just like kind of the movie plot needed to happen. My phone, sorry. Yeah, like the movie plot just kind of needed to happen. So it was like Jared, like that actor, like his character, like his sister was missing. So it was like, I don't know, I guess they wanted to give some sort of hope that like she was still alive when, you know, it was kind of implied that she was dead. In any other Friday the 13th movie, she would have been dead. So I think it's kind of silly. I actually think there were a couple like memorable kills in this one. The one where like the total D-bag character who like owns the vacation home or whatever, like him getting impaled on like the back of the one pickup truck and then just being driven away as he's like just laying there impaled, I thought was pretty cool. The one death of like the girl being under the pier, like she thinks she's like safe for a second because Jason's right above her, and then so just like the machete like goes through the cracks and like impales her through the head, and then, you know, pulls the machete up. And, you know, that's a pretty memorable one. I like that one. And then I did think the very end of the movie, I like, the fake out, like, oh, he's not really dead. Like, I thought that with the pier as well, I thought worked really well. It is silly. Yeah, there's like a whole, like, they do the barn thing kind of like from part 3 as like the final confrontation, but there's like this whole like chain thing that's being fed through a wood chipper. Jason slowly like is like getting sucked into it, and to me it's like, I never personally used a wood chipper, but to me I'm like, I feel like it would have severed part of that chain eventually and Jason would have been fine. But of course they couldn't have Jason go through a wood chipper and be like splattered, and, you know, because they were probably, you know, hinting at a sequel for, you know, the remake, but that didn't end up happening. I mean, there's still some stuff to enjoy about the Friday the 13th remake. I don't think it's among one of the best, but, you know, to those who praise it, I kind of understand their praise for it, because it is definitely one of the more unique ones. It was just trying to, it had the, like in the beginning of the movie, you know, you had basically the end of Friday the 13th part 1 with Jason's mom, Pamela, like getting decapitated. Like I was during the opening credits of the remake, so it was kind of have to establish that, but we want to do like where it's Jason. And of course, Jason ends up donning the hockey mask, like, you know, halfway through the movie of the remake. So, but yeah, pretty enjoyable one. Next up is Friday the 13th part 2. This one's pretty enjoyable. The unmasking of Jason, he just looks like super ugly, like ugly mofo, like Predator, you know, drop the Predator line, one ugly, you know. I mean, it's pretty enjoyable, you know, burlap sack Jason. Yeah, I don't think it's like, doesn't have the most memorable kills. I know it has like the machete to the face death of like the handicap guy, so I think that's one of the more memorable ones. I think that's part 2. If I'm wrong, I'm really sorry. Pretty sure that's from part 2, so that's one of the more memorable Jason deaths. It's an enjoyable one. It's not the best, it's not the worst, and this is towards the beginning of the series, so it's the very first one with Jason as a grown-up, vengeance for the death of his mom. I liked it. I also liked the very end of the movie with Final Girl dressing up, you know, as Jason's mom, like putting on the sweater and everything and trying to manipulate him. Yeah, it's an enjoyable one. I haven't seen it in a little while, so just some stuff hasn't really stuck with me recently about part 2, but part 2 was one of the better ones of the series. So, and then next up is the very first one that started it, Friday the 13th part 1. This one it's a big old whodunit, because you're just like, someone's obviously getting picked off. A lot of people are thinking it's Jason. You know, this has Kevin Bacon in it. He had the memorable death with like the harpoon going through his throat. I don't know if it was him, but it might have been somebody else, where it was like the harpoon went through the bed and they got impaled from having sex. So Betsy Palmer, who plays Pamela Voorhees, I thought did an amazing job. And last part of the movie, I really like a lot, actually, where she does the whole exposition dump, you know, her whole motivation of everything, of why, you know, she was taking revenge. Because it's like, yeah, the dude was like bullied and like literally ended up drowning with 2 camp counselors, like having sex and not keeping an eye on people. So, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed off too. Kind of understand the motivation there. You had the whole decapitation of Pamela Voorhees, her head getting decapitated. It is a pretty generic, like, run-of-the-mill slasher movie, but this was right off of the height of, Halloween coming out. They rushed out Friday the 13th because it was like, whole slasher movie was praised, so it was like they jumped on that. Obviously, it took off. A lot of sequels were made, so it worked, and this one started it. Like I said earlier, with like newcomers of the series, like a lot of people don't realize that, like, oh, part one actually didn't involve really Jason. It was just the very end, which is one of the more memorable parts of the series. The final girl, laying in the boat, and then Jason as a kid is just like all mangled, his mangled, drowned corpse or whatever. He just like pops up out of the water and pulls her under. That's like one of the better jump scares in like horror movies. Pretty enjoyable one. I know a lot of people don't like part one that much, or they like, if they do a rewatch of the series, they like to skip over part one, but I think part one's still pretty solid. Next up is one that I would say it's probably one of the more rewatchable ones, one I go back to quite a bit, and this was one that people really asked for a long time, and it took like over 10 years for it to finally come out. Freddy vs. Jason. I'm counting it in this. I know it's not strictly just a Jason movie, it's a Jason and Freddy movie, but I like Freddy vs. Jason a lot. I remember even at the time that this came out, at least like I would watch this on like the Sci-Fi channel. This is one I feel like was on Sci-Fi constantly, and I would watch it all the time. I felt like it got a lot of hate first few years that it had been out. Like, people really like dunked on this movie, and I don't really understand why. As far as like watching Freddy vs. Jason, it delivers. It does. It's silly. I guess that's what I really like about it, because it's not taking itself that seriously. There are some CGI effects that don't work. Jay and Silent Bob type stoner character gets really high, and then he sees like Freddy as like this weird like caterpillar creature or whatever. Like that CGI effect is like not very good. Okay job of bringing Freddy and Jason together. Of course you do have to suspend your disbelief, but it's also like you shouldn't take it that seriously. It's like you just want to see Freddy and Jason fight each other. That's what ends up happening. You obviously have like the slasher group of characters that slowly get picked off. Of course you need to have that, because it's like, I don't know if Freddy or Jason by themselves can really carry a movie. Obviously Jason, being the silent type, there's no way you could watch a Friday the 13th movie with just Jason. They kind of tried that with In a Violent Nature, that movie, and I like that movie, but it's like, I understand why people like hated that movie, because it's like you're just watching a silent killer walk around and kind of stalk his victims. So it's like, that's the type of movie you would have if it was just following Jason around. Kind of group of slasher characters that get picked off are not bad at all. You have like the flaming machete kill, which is pretty solid. You have like the dream sequence with like Jason being thrown around a boiler room and Freddy pretending he's like a pinball machine. It's ridiculous, but it's like fun. Yeah, as far as like the final fight of the movie, it delivers, and it gets so ridiculously gory and over the top with its violence. It's a good time. It's just fun. Jason gets his like fingers like cut off, and like he just like looks at his fingers, and yeah, just like how Jason takes out Freddy, it's like, it's awesome. And to me, like, a lot of people are like, oh, you freaking ended the movie as a tie. I'm like, I mean, yeah, technically you could say that it was a tie between both of them, but also when you're looking at it from, a microscopic lens, it's like, to me, Jason won that battle. Freddy, it's your head. He's literally holding your head, and you have no body. I love Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah, next up is one that was supposed to be the end of the series, but with how horror movies are, horror franchises don't die. Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. This one's just fun. If the series ended on this one, this was probably one of the better ones to go out on. The unmasking of Jason's really solid. You have Corey Feldman as Tommy Jarvis, the main character. You have the group of teenagers. You have Crispin Glover's character, which is like, I would have watched a 90-minute movie of just him being that character. He gets a good machete to the face as well. Hey Ted, where the hell's the corkscrew? How Jason dies also is pretty memorable. Him getting his own machete to the face, actually slowly like impaled through the face, is pretty great. This is just a fun time. Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Quite a shame. There's like this big dark cloud that hangs over Part 7. I love Part 7, and it's one that I rewatch a lot. It's one of my favorites of the series. Obviously, it's, in second place here. The big dark cloud it got edited into oblivion with all the kills. This has one of the most, memorable ones, the sleeping bag kill. Most of the kills of this movie get cut away from, which is a real shame. To sell this movie for other people or new horror fans, you're like, it's Jason versus Carrie. A girl with telekinesis, trying to take on Jason. It sounds pretty awesome. It is pretty run-of-the-mill Friday the 13th plot. You have the group of teenagers go out into the woods to Camp Crystal Lake. People get slowly picked off. You have your main girl character who, has a lot of trauma in her past with her dad and, stuff like that, and saw a therapist for years. Basically starts, having these telekinetic powers. Pretty cool. It adds a cool supernatural element, at least to a protagonist. She wasn't totally powerless. This was the first Jason movie with Kane Hodder as Jason. Physical performance as Jason. He just looks super menacing. He just looks like pure anger. It's awesome. Jason, when his mask ends up coming off, the look of him is awesome. It's falling through a floor. He straight up axes one character right in the face and then throws her, and she goes flying behind a television. Pretty great stuff. Yeah, despite it being edited into oblivion, this is still a fun watch. All the unedited footage that I found is the quality is so low quality. It's still a fun watch. So yeah, it's one of the better Jason movies. So that leaves us with our number one pick, and I guess I'm a fan of just especially slasher films. If slasher films are just a fun time, and I think this is the closest thing to being the most fun you could watch a Friday the 13th movie with, and that's Part 6, Jason Lives. He comes back to life from a lightning bolt. He gets stabbed with some spear or harpoon from Tommy Jarvis after he digs him up, and then lightning just strikes the harpoon and then electrocutes him, and he comes back to life like he's freaking Frankenstein's monster. And then Jason's back to wreak havoc. It's great. Everything in this movie is just let's just have the most fun with it. Let's be the most self-aware. It has the whole James Bond parody at the beginning, where it's the tunnel vision, and then James Bond turns and shoots at the camera. It's it's Jason with his machete. That kind of sets the tone of the whole movie. I like Tommy Jarvis as a character a lot in this. I'm glad they kind of abandoned the whole Tommy Jarvis is a killer now, and they were just let's ignore that. Let's just have Tommy Jarvis be still this vengeful person that's Jason messed up my life and I just want to make sure he's dead. Of course, he shouldn't have done that. There's just funny little references from this movie that's in Mortal Kombat X if you play as Jason. This is where Jason basically becomes a real supernatural being. This is his zombie phase. This is my number one pick. It's you don't really need to see the others. Most of the Friday the 13th movies, you don't really need to see previous ones. I would recommend obviously just starting from part 1, but what's Friday the 13th about? What's the most fun one? I would say it's part 6. And other ones in the franchise, it's we know how silly it can be, especially slasher films, but part of them do take themselves seriously, but this one is just just go crazy, just make it funny. It does it really well. That's gonna wrap it up for me. I hope you all have enjoyed. Let me know what your ranking is. Everyone's got a ranking if they're a big fan of this franchise. This was just mine. Mine necessarily isn't the right answer. I just love to know other people's opinions. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you in a future video.